Euphoria. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you've all had a blessed week thus far. So, I'm recording two personal vlogs in this week because last week I didn't manage to get that first one in. So, it's kind of weird saying the same thing at different times. Whatever, who cares? In the previous podcast, I spoke about Humble Yourself First, which was kind of a separate thing from the whole topic, at least kind of the topic of, I don't want to say topic of discussion, but kind of what I was talking about in the last three podcasts. And so, in terms of this one, we're going to be just picking up where we left off, which was kind of, with regards to my personal journey battling addiction. And so, I try to be as more authentic with these things. Addiction, I don't know. It's a funny thing. It depends. It's the magnitude of its effect on you is really dependent on the strength of your mind, right? And addiction for one person can be a fucking nightmare, and addiction for another person can just be another irritation. Small thing on the side could be entertainment, for that matter. What I've learned is that it all comes down to the strength of the individual's mind. And so, when I kind of was doing my own personal evaluation, I was like, okay, is addiction really an issue in my life, or is it one of those things that just comes and goes? It's like a subtle thing that doesn't need to kind of be attended to, in like a major sense. Obviously, I was on the extreme end of it, and I was on the major side of it, and I started to ask myself why, because you always get jealous of people. Have you ever met those people that just somehow know how to handle their shit? Things don't affect their sobriety, and meaning that they're so focused that even little things that throw most people off never, they doesn't seem to affect or face some individuals. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, what characteristics do these individuals have, and what characteristics do I lack that these individuals possess? I actually come back, there's a funny thing on that one, because it's actually a very stupid thing to do, to compare yourself to someone and see what they have and what you don't have. But it's always good to evaluate what attributes they have that help them prevent them from falling into the same pitfalls that you're falling into, right? And so with addiction, it's funny, it just comes down to the strength of mind and to a large extent the power of will. I think we live in a world where the mind is kind of a central thing. It's such a powerful thing, and it's kind of the focus of what it means to be like an individual. It's like kind of the pinnacle, in quotation marks. And so, when you start to look at people's minds, you look at people who have very, very fixed ways of being in their mind, meaning that no matter what, certain things stay true to themselves in certain modes of operation. It's like a program. I call it the CPU again, and that program will always play itself out regardless of what's interfering with the program running. And so addiction can be seen as a sign of a virus that irritates the CPU, meaning it maybe slows it down and denies it optimal functionality, but regardless, the CPU still performs. Whereas people with weak minds, or people who succumb to addiction, the CPU has no, set function, meaning that there's no consistency in thought. The mind is inconsistent, hence any alteration can be quite, I don't want to use the word catastrophic, but quite detrimental, simply because the CPU's mechanism of sustaining the basic functionality, like a set program. I don't know how I'm talking about it like this, but the CPU's ability to maintain a consistent program of functioning, basic things that have to happen all the time, regardless of circumstances, situation. People who succumb to addiction, we don't have that. And so I started looking what causes people not to have that fixed firmness that prevents you from being thrown off all the time, in terms of the mind, obviously. And I realized it has to do with identity, and so I'm actually in later personal blogs, I'm going to talk about that in a spiritual sense, what I've been also learning on that regard. But funny enough, people who have a set identity in their mind, an idea of who they are or who they want to be, irrespective of circumstance, irrespective of influence, whatever the state of affairs is, they have a certain identity or idea of themselves in their mind, and that idea literally prevents any type of interference, from being disrupted, from maintaining its place in the mind. Whereas people who are often succumbing to addiction, they on the other hand have no idea or sense of idea of who they are, right? There's an open-mindedness to them, which is why if you look at it, the majority of people that kind of fall into addiction, they're quite artistic, they are liberal in their thinking, they don't, they often have a very open mind and an open view and perspective of the world, and quite, that often leads them into situations where their mind can be influenced, and ultimately because they have no real idea of who they are, and whatever the association is at that moment, that's what they'll identify themselves with. In my case, that's at least how I operate. I'm not saying it's universal. That is where it becomes, that's the difference, that's the tipping point, right? The tipping point is people who know how to keep a consistent idea of themselves, things they will do and things that they won't do, versus people that have an inconsistent idea of themselves and will do things according to circumstance and whatever the needs may necessitate, whatever the needs may be at that moment, that point in time. Started there. And so that was kind of where it kind of all revolutionized. I was like, oh man, and there's positives and negatives to everything. There's good and bad things about having a fixed idea of yourself, like having an identity in quotation marks. And there's also positives and negatives to having no identity. There's a certain things that come with that, But in terms of addiction, it's always good to have a firmer mind from what I've seen, so that you can, somehow negate a lot of the detrimental effects of being addicted. Some people will drink alcohol and they'll become pure alcoholics, and they'll succumb to the influence of it. They will become dependent on it. Whereas some people will drink alcohol on occasion, simply, out of fun, out of curiosity, but it'll never shape them or burden them eternally with their identity or what it means to be themselves with or without the substance, right? There's no identity crisis with people with a firm mind, and there's always an identity crisis with people with a very open mind. And so, it's just, I find it interesting when I was observing my own thought process versus others, how the looseness in my mind is a lot of the times been quite detrimental in terms of how addiction influences me and everything like that. And there's also been some positives. It's also helped in terms of healing, right? In terms of recovering, because what I've also realized that people with a strong mind, when they do fall, when someone with a strong mind falters, it's quite often much harder for them to recover, not because they're not strong, but because things are so concrete, in their minds, that once that's taken away or once that's altered in a way, there's kind of a serious crisis that happens. If you have an open mind and you succumb to addiction, you go through the journey, in a way you don't have anything preventing you in a way from you don't have anything in a way preventing you from recreating yourself. And it's just saying, okay, this is, rebuilding your identity. Whereas if you had a fixed building and you had an identity and that building is destroyed, it's much more difficult to rebuild, because you have a fixed blueprint in your mind, and that blueprint being brought to a halt or being altered or changed in any way is much more difficult. And which is actually interesting, because it sounds like a whole bunch of gibberish, but I'm saying it's funny because people who don't succumb to addiction a lot of the time it's also because they negate their interaction with it. You know, they don't want to risk compromising their identity. You know, smart people just like, you never have to say like, I know better, or you know, I'm conscious enough, I'm not that stupid, right? Whereas people with an open mind, they'll be like, look, man, whatever happens, happens. You know, I'm open to experience, typical things like that. And so hence, they always end up falling into those experiences simply because of their open-mindedness to everything. You know, there's no attachment to what they think of themselves, and so there's no kind of fear or that discernment that this could be bad and this could be dangerous. I don't know if that makes sense. So yeah, the whole crux of this personal vlogs was really about addiction in terms of fixed-mindedness and open-mindedness, and which one is more vulnerable, which one's the more vulnerable of the two. And yeah, you guys let me know what you think, because I know there are plenty of open-minded people that never succumb to addiction simply because, you know, the level of openness that they've had means, you know, it doesn't incline them to seek anything. You know, they feel connected. They don't need to do anything to feel or to, you know. And a lot of fixed-minded people that I know that do fall into addiction, and it's quite the rough fucking struggle, right? And so, you know, everyone has their own different perspective, and but one thing is certain, that a lot of us are fixed-minded, and so a lot of us are open-minded, and the very few rare of us are no-minded at all. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for tuning in. And no-minded, you guys can try take your guess on what I mean by that one. But again, no-minded individuals are maybe about, you know, 1 in a trillion, yeah. And so yeah, no. Thank you for tuning in. Have a blessed rest of the week. Have a good weekend as well. And yeah, shall we